124. Song of Degrees of David. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, now may Israel say, if it had not been the Lord who was on our side, when men rose up against us, and they had swallowed us up quick when their wrath was kindled against us, and the waters had overwhelmed us, the stream had gone over our soul, and the proud waters have gone over our soul. Blessed be the Lord who hath not given us as prey to their teeth. Our soul is escaped as a bird out of the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken, and we are escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord, who had made heaven and earth.
We're going to continue on to the next section. Samuel 17 through 18, 24 through 26. Oh, 2 Samuel 5 through 7. One person with faith in Christ can make a difference. In addition to personal challenges, we also face large, complex problems that affect the whole world. When forces of evil are gathered together to battle against the forces of good, we might wonder how our individual efforts could possibly make a difference. What do you find in David's story that gives you hope? It does feel, you know what's interesting? It does feel like the forces of evil are gathered to battle against the forces of good. And in the news, all I see are all these atrocities and all these people getting angry about the atrocities and starting to burn things down because their government won't stop the atrocities. That's kind of all that the news is talking about these days. And then suddenly, the World Cup comes to America.
Mm-hmm.
And something like 16 countries are in America.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all over America.
Right.
All these people have phones, and they've been recording their experience in America, and it's been overwhelmingly positive.
Mm-hmm.
Where all of these people who are foreign to this land have only seen the news and thought America was a certain way. They've come and they've discovered all these things that we take for granted, and they're like, America's amazing. And their minds are just blown by all this stuff. And they're blown away by how friendly everybody is and how nice everyone's being to them. And the news is suddenly reporting on something, on human relationships that are good. And I think that God gives us a lot of opportunities to see the good in the darkness, and see the light in the darkness, and to reconnect with our brothers and sisters in a positive way. So the big issue lately has been immigration and different cultures coming in and not respecting our culture and destroying it and trying to take it over and all this stuff. And so there's been a lot of negativity about immigrants. But then all of a sudden we have thousands, because the fans will fly in too. We had 20,000 Scottish people fly in to go to their first game in 30 years. And they took over the whole city of Boston. And everyone fell in love with them, and they loved being here. And I just watched a video of Times Square in New York, how all of these countries' fans came in together to Times Square, and they're just having a good time. And it was a melting pot of countries just from all over the world. And it was a celebration of, it was just all these people really enjoying the moment, being in a beautiful place with a bunch of happy people who are excited about what they're experiencing. It was reconnecting with other humans on a level that it was soccer for them. You know, soccer is connecting all of these people together. It's a beautiful thing to see people from every culture in the world connecting about something good and beautiful that they share. So how much more would the gospel, would the love of Jesus Christ, the atonement, overcome all of these boundaries that we put up between each other, and just connect us together and help us see the light in each other and just love each other without saying you have to be like me in order for me to accept you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So if we go to 1 Samuel 17, 26 through 50, does somebody want to read that?
David spoke to the men that stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that killeth this Philistine, and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? The people answered him after this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab his eldest brother heard when he spake unto the men. And Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, Why camest thou down hither? And with whom hast thou left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and the naughtiness of thy heart, for thou art come down that thou mightest see the battle. And David said, What have I now done? Is there not a cause? And he turned from him toward another, spake after the same manner. The people answered him again after the former manner. And when the words were heard which David spake, they rehearsed them before Saul, and he sent for him. And David said unto Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him. Thy servant will go and fight with this Philistine. And Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he be a man of war from his youth. And David said unto Saul, Thy servant kept his father's sheep. There came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock. I went out after him, smote him, delivered it out of his mouth. When he arose against me, I caught him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine shall be one of them, as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. And David said moreover, The Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said unto David, Go, and the Lord be with thee. And Saul armed David with his armor, and he put an helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail. David girded his sword upon his armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off him, and he took his staff in his hand, and chose him 5 smooth stones out of the brook, and put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had, even in a scrip. And a sling was in his hand, and he drew near unto the Philistine. And the Philistine came on, and drew near unto David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. When the Philistine looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and of a fair countenance. The Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog that thou hast come to me with staves? The Philistine cursed David by his gods. The Philistine said to David, Come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air, and to the beasts of the field. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword, and a spear, and with a shield, but I have come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day to the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. All this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with the sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran towards the army to meet the Philistine. David put his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead. That the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling, and with a stone, and smote the Philistine, and slew him, but there was no sword in the hand of David.
So one guy who led with joy and excitement changed the world for a minute. One little David with faith in Jesus changed his world for a minute. I don't know if you guys are ever going to face something like a Goliath, where you're out in front of the battle lines for your whole country. Freddie was kind of representing his whole country there. But you can apply this to all of the battles that you face in your life. I don't know if I've ever told you, I'm sure I've told you the story about that kid I grew up with. When we were at a party, some little kid came over and started throwing rocks at us. We were only like 12 or 13, and this kid was maybe like 8. And we were outside in the garage, open garage, and this little kid came over from the neighborhood and started throwing rocks at us. So all the boys and a few girls chased this kid, and he gets on his bike and rides off, and then he ditches the bike and runs down into this ditch, this like 15-foot ditch, and he falls, and everyone catches up with him, and everyone's gonna like is all aggressive and angry and yelling at him, and it feels like this kid's gonna get it. And then this one boy helped the kid up and dusted him off. It was like, you go home now and don't come pestering other people, okay? And helped him get out of the ditch and sent him home. And it was a moment where it taught me how to choose goodness no matter what everybody else is doing, how everybody else is feeling. You choose goodness no matter what. You choose to treat someone well despite what everybody else is doing. And I will never forget the feeling I had when he did that. Like, it was a profound gospel moment for me. And the darker the world becomes, the less they're going to see people. We're going to see people choosing that. Everyone's favorite thing to do online is yell at each other and criticize each other. And one man was like, I am going to celebrate these amazing things that are part of this culture that everybody's been dogging on for centuries now. So, do you guys experience these scripture stories? And when we read these scripture stories, do you ever contemplate your own life and your own life experience and how you can use what you're learning here for that? So, when you read about David going up and talking to Goliath like that, and the words that they used to say to him in that moment is, what does that bring to mind for you in your own life? So, like, when I saw that kid be nice to the little boy, it changed how I lived my life. It taught me something about how to treat people that I emulated. I tried to emulate my whole life. I applied what I just saw to how I want to be. And I remember when I was in 7th grade, which was probably just like a year later, I was in a science class that was for 7th and 8th graders. No, I was in 8th grade. And some 7th graders were in there, so we didn't know them very well. I knew the 8th graders, but I didn't know the 7th graders very well. There are these two girls who were really popular and really pretty, and they sat together, and they decided that this kid in this classroom, who I'd grown up with, was a really nice guy, but he was a cowboy in a town of super rich mountain people. But, well, you can actually think of them as little mini models. That's the kind of kids I went to school with. We're all these just beautiful, rich, shiny people who had all of the money in the world to buy anything they wanted. Always looked pretty, always looked, relaxed. Just no worries in life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this boy I grew up with grew up on just south of the valley on a ranch, hundreds of acres. He wore Wranglers. He wore the jean jackets. And he was a good guy. He wasn't like weird. It wasn't like people are like, oh, why do you do weird stuff like eat your boogers? He was a good guy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they started going after him for what he was wearing and making fun of him. And I had no hesitation in that moment of just being like, who makes you the arbiter of fashion? Who says you get to choose what everybody else gets to wear? Leave them alone. And I don't think that those girls were bad people. I think that they just got on the topic and went with it. And all I had to do was say that, and suddenly they were nice to him. Like, that's all it took. And they invited him to come and sit with them, and they became friends. And so it's okay to assert God's precepts into the world, because it makes people feel better when they accept them. Occasionally that will happen. Sometimes you can try to assert light into the world, and darkness tries to kill it because it threatens the darkness. And like Goliath, sometimes you kind of come up against a Goliath who just, you have to defeat it and get rid of it. But sometimes it just is showing what is good in a moment, and the goodness in people react to it and want to stay with it. But if you don't have any kind of these moments when we're studying these scriptures where you're like, I want to be like that, or I want when this kind of stuff happens, I want to respond in this way. If you never have these kind of moments where you feel like it's changing the way you want to live or teaching you how you are going to behave in different circumstances, then I would say ask God to help you be inspired or to touch your heart or mind with the Spirit to help you have the scriptures change you when you are reading these kind of stories. And sincerely want to be like the goodness that you read in these stories and to use the goodness that you read in these stories. Because otherwise, it's just some nice stories that we sit down and talk about for a minute, and then you go on doing life the exact same way. It doesn't change you in any. So, one of the things that this section is telling us is that you can find hope in this story. And why is hope such an important part of our life experience?
It'd be a lot more efficient if you have something to believe in.
Yeah.
A lot more efficient.
Yeah.
Explain that. Why is it more efficient?
Well, you have a goal, you have a target you're going for if you have something to believe in.
One of the
Otherwise, you're just aimless and doing nothing.
one of the images that we're given for that is a anchorless ship tossed about in the tempest. So hope anchors you to something, right?
Yeah.
What is the opposite of hope?
Despair.
So if you're despairing, what is your likelihood of succeeding?
Not much.
What is your likelihood of participating in the thing? If you're in despair, how likely are you to put effort in to the situation?
Not very.
So if you're not putting effort in, how can you succeed? How would success happen?
It won't.
So you probably still want to succeed, but you've lost the belief that you can. And so you probably stop trying. So if you're not trying, but you still want it to happen, what is it that you're wanting to happen?
For it to just happen.
For it to just happen, for somebody else to make it happen. And that's not the point of the trials that we go through. You want God to take it away from you, or you want Santa Claus to fly in and drop a present in your lap. You want a savior. There's no point in going through these afflictions if somebody else comes in and solves your problem. The whole point of going through these experiences is for you. Now, every once in a while, I will say, though, I have gone through moments where I have done everything that I can think of. Maybe not everything that I can do because I can't think of it, but I've gone through everything that I know to do, and I've asked for inspiration if I, and it doesn't get solved. And I hit a wall and I go, I don't know what else to do. The only solution is, God, you have to take this off of me. Or teach me or show me how to solve this. And there have been several times in my life where I hit that wall and I just have to sit down in front of it. And I can't move. I can't go anywhere because I've hit a wall. And how do you have hope in that situation where you can't do anything?
Pray for.
Yeah. I mean, especially if time drags on long enough. Think of Job, he was super faithful for a long time, but as it drug on and on and on, and more horrible stuff started happening, he started to be like, please make it stop. At first he was like, I'll endure whatever I need to, and by the end he wasn't like cursing God or anything, but he was like, please just take me, please just make this stop. Sometimes you really have to go through these moments of holding still and just living in a difficult situation. And there's a moment in the Book of Mormon where the Gadianton robbers are so numerous that they could just kill everybody. And so the leader of the Nephites, the leader of the Gadianton robbers writes to the Nephite leader and says, we're going to come and take over next week. Just to let you know, prepare yourselves. And so the leader, next month or something. And so the leader of the Nephites says, let's gather everybody together into one place and get enough food to last us 7 years. Let's stockpile all our food bring in all of our livestock, and build a fortress around us, and be prepared for 7 years to be besieged by these robbers. And so the robbers, they do it, and the robbers come, and the robbers are thinking to themselves, there's no way that they're going to survive if we just cut them off from their land. And so for 3 years, like, we lived in this house for 4.
5.
So almost the entire time that we lived in this house, the robbers would be like out there trying to kill us. And we would have just our supply. We'd live in our little compound and we'd have our food supplies, and we couldn't do anything.
Well, also, we'd have thousands and thousands of people with us.
Yeah. And we couldn't do anything. We would just be sitting inside this compound, eating the food that we've stockpiled and just hanging out. Right?
I wouldn't mind hanging out with my friends for 3 years.
So, and then it went on for like 7 years. It went on for a really long time. 7 years. That's a long time to just sit in a problem. If you were to despair in that moment and do something rash, you could bring the whole thing down, right? You could ruin everything. If you lost hope in the plan, if you lost hope in the goal, if I'm sitting in front of that wall that I can't overcome or get around, if I were to despair and walk away or just lay there till I die, hope is the belief that there is a solution to any problem you face. And one of the things that always scared me when I was a kid reading scriptures was moments like when Abinadi was burned at the stake. And he said before that, I've been called, God called me to tell you these things. And after I'm done, I'm not done yet, so you can't do anything to me. But after I'm done, whatever happens to me happens. And it troubled my spirit, and I could not comprehend how him being burned was part of the plan. Because it's terrifying, you know. But if you truly have hope that God will overcome, then you can look at those situations and still believe that God overcame in that moment. And it changes your perspective. I think a lot of those times when you're sitting in front of that wall, what has to change is your perspective on what's important. Because maybe while you're sitting in front of that wall, you get to spend a ton of time with your spouse that you don't usually get to spend. Maybe you're teaching other people lessons while you're sitting there. Maybe you get to realign with God in those moments. And Abinadi, it teaches you that God is more important than living. It just teaches you what's actually important. It's like